And these are, you must have heard about paints, varnishes, and distempers. You must have heard a lot about these building materials. Now, what is a paint, varnish, and a distemper? First of all, about the paint, if you just go and check, these are all oil-based actually materials. And being oil-based materials, they will always have a base within the oil, and that oil acts as a base in which the other products are blended. So that's why पेंट अगर किसी चीज पे लग जाए तो वो सीधे सीधे you cannot remove that because it is oil based. तो oil based चीज जहां पर भी लग जाती है तो it maintains a permanent scar और वहां पर वो छोड़ देता है, and then it's very difficult to remove that. So paints are oil based, varnishes are oil based as well, distempers are not oil based. They are actually water based products. Now this is its primary difference between these paints, varnishes, and distempers. Now, if you go into the chemical composition of each one of these, there are hundreds of products in paints. Now, today you must have heard you are having acrylic-based paints, which have an acrylic composition within it. And what that is doing, that's acting as a waterproofing agent within the paint itself. So you have a plastic resin present within the paint itself. So there are acrylic-based resins being added to the paints such that they become waterproof, and they do not. You must have seen acrylic-based products में क्या होता है, then epoxy-based products, they are not spoiled by water. They are not spoiled by dust. They are not spoiled by the sunlight falling onto them. They do not peel off easily because they have an epoxy resin. What does an epoxy resin do? Epoxy resin binds the paint perfectly. उसमें binding action ज़्यादा आ जाती है. So in a paint, in a varnish and a distemper, one, you need a base. Base is which acts as जिसमें सारे products it's like a solvent in chemistry terms. तो उसमें जिसमें एक solution बन जाता है. तो जो ही वो कहीं पर paint किया जाता है, it combines with air and you get a surface which is now dry. So it reacts chemically with the air. तो air में आपके पास क्या है? You have carbon dioxide and you have the oxygen. So it may combine with these products within the air. तो उसके बाद वो एक dry surface बना लेता है. Secondly, if you are having epoxy resins within the paint, what they will do, वो उसके ऊपर एक और layer चढ़ा देगा, epoxy resin की layer, जो आपको एक तो ग्लासी लुक देता है फॉर पेंट. सेकेंडली, इट्स गिविंग a smooth texture, epoxy resin. Thirdly, it's acting as a binder of the paint to the surface. तो इम्पॉर्टेंट ये है जहां जिस सरफेस पे हम पेंट अप्लाई करते हैं, वार्निश अप्लाई करते हैं, डिस्टेम्पर्स अप्लाई करते हैं, वो सरफेस पहले साफ हो. तो इट्स वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट दैट सरफेस इज क्लीन. Secondly, it could be smooth surface जहां पर हम अप्लाई कर रहे हैं. Now, if you are applying to a rough textured surface, it will not apply properly onto that surface rather than applying on a smooth surface. Thirdly, the surface should be free from उसमें cracks ना हो, and so such things should not be present there within the surface. Then जब ये चीजें होंगी तब वो पेंट, वार्निश या डिस्टेम्पर सरफेस पे अच्छे से बाइंड हो जाएगा, चिपक जाएगा. Secondly, you then also require, one is the surface. Secondly, जो आप paint, varnish और distemper use कर रहे हो, now different companies have different paints, varnishes and distempers. अब company based है, and there is a lot of difference between companies because of their manufacturing process. So you must have heard about Asian paints. You must have, which are very good paints as compared to the other paints. So then there are very poor quality paints, just means you don't get a proper finish, and because they are not produced, the manufacturing process is not perfect. तो उनमें ऑयल घटिया इस्तेमाल किया जाता है, उनमें कलर्स जो ब्लेंडिंग के लिए कलर्स यूज किए जाते हैं, दे आर नॉट ऑफ गुड क्वालिटी. एंड देन you will also find out that in distempers, if it's a water base, तो उसमें water, plain water is very much important कि वो हो. So these are primary requirements of the company which is manufacturing. Then there may be companies which are claiming that they have epoxy resin based acrylic paints, but at the end of the day it's not so. तो उसमें वो almost absent होता है, so you are not getting a good quality paint at the end of the day. So very important you have good company as well while selecting paints, varnishes and distempers. Now paints, varnishes and distempers, you can have now different classifications. First of all, based on various classifications, but I want to go with this classifications on material based paints. You have wood as one material, you have steel, you have concrete, or you have bricks, or you could have certain and these plastics materials जिन पे paint आपको apply करना है in the building. So wood, you would find that near in doors, you would easily find that in almiras and in wardrobes. You will find that in windows. So then you could find that in furniture. Steel might be present in our houses, not to that much, but it is present in small quantities. If you're using steel trusses and others, so steel is there in buildings as well. So concrete is always there, bricks are always there. So, and then the plastic based materials, which are new materials which are being used for, like in PVC and others, which are being used for lamination, for getting a better surface textures. So there you could also be painting them or varnishing them, those surfaces, for a glossy look. So all these materials जहाँ पर हमें paint apply करना है, so wood based, steel based, concrete, brick and plastic based materials के हिसाब से we may select different types of paints, varnishes and distempers for these surfaces. So it could be brick or cement plaster based, you can say. तो इनके हिसाब से आप ये पेंट्स, वार्निश एंड डिस्टेम्पर सिलेक्ट करते हो. तो पहली चीज, फॉर एग्जांपल वी आर टेकिंग वुड एज द फर्स्ट मटेरियल. तो वुड पे अगर हमें पेंट अप्लाई करना है, व्हाट सॉर्ट ऑफ पेंट विल वी अप्लाई ऑन वुड? एंड बिफोर अप्लाइंग पेंट or varnish, what do you do on wood? You want, when we studied wood, I told you about, we want the wood to be seasoned properly, and then it should be free from moisture, और ताकि उसमें कल को फंगस ग्रोथ ना हो जाए. तो उसके लिए we chemically treat it. So one of the chemical treatments apart from which I described there, जिसमें हमने वहाँ पर we discuss about the borax and other materials which could be used there. There are wood-based paints or primers that you initially apply onto the wood. So wood primer is a important one once you apply on the wood first. So first thing you go on wood with is the wood primer. उसके ऊपर then you start with the coatings of either with paint or you start with the varnish. You can directly go for varnish. You can directly go for varnish without using a wood primer. But you cannot go for wood paint without using a wood primer, because paint will not go into the surface of the wood. Now, in using all these varnishes or paints on wood, you must have seen there is a certain material, एक केमिकल हम यूज करते हैं जिसकी वजह से एक बदबू जैसी आ जाती है for certain days. Any one of you who knows about that material? Yes, any one of you?
Tarp.
Petrol.
नहीं जी, petrol.
Tarpin, sir.
Tar paint, yes. So what is the purpose of that? Again, it's for chemical treatment of the wood. And so that is being used in wood treatment actually. So what do these all actually do? It's wood primer, or you have all these. तो हमें पहला मकसद है, you actually want the wood to be chemically treated such that biological growth does not happen. Secondly, then you apply the wood paint. Now, distemper is hardly used on the wood. Then you go to steel. Steel may you use steel primer as base. And the purpose of steel primer here is steel primer we use in steel. The purpose here is to allow the steel not to get corroded. So it's a same color, brownish color primer जो हम steel के ऊपर चढ़ा देते हैं, such that it does not get corroded. So it's an antioxidant paint actually that is applied first onto the steel, such that oxygen does not reach to the main steel body, and so there is hardly any corrosion that would happen onto the steel. Then you apply the main steel के ऊपर paint coatings which you apply on concrete or on cement, plaster or bricks. इसके ऊपर what you do actually, you have it's a base coat which has to be again either distemper base, or you would have the primers being applied there as well. So you could have a distemper base initial surface, और जो हमने पढ़ा इससे पहले PVC base initial surface you could get. But if you cannot afford PVC based or putty based surface, so what do you do then in that case? तो वहां पर we can just apply a distemper coating first onto the, which is low cost, would be applying a distemper coating which is water based. So that goes into the small holes within the cement voids, fills them up. Then you can go on applying different layers of these paints, but they are putty based paints that you can also apply, or you can apply the liquid based paints. So there could be 3 layers. First layer could be distemper, then you could have putty based coating over it again, and then you could apply a final paint cover onto the cement, plaster, concrete or bricks. So ये 3 layers में you can go for it. But you can also go for 2 layers wherein you just apply the distemper, and then over the distemper you apply a thick acrylic based paint over the cement plaster. Finally, then you have the plastic materials. Somebody saying galvanization regarding steel. Galvanization is a different technique wherein the zinc coating is done over the steel, and that's a different technique, and that's factory based. So that has nothing to do with the paints, varnishing, and the distemper applications, which I am talking about. So plastic based materials में जहां पर आता है, you have PVC based materials, right? So PVC based materials are plastered by certain other materials. Sorry, it's painted by certain other materials. So there, it's very easy. If you are getting a white calcium silicate board अगर आपके पास है, तो उसके ऊपर आप सीधे एक पेंट ऊपर से मार सकते हो. और you can just nowadays what they do on the calcium silicate board, which is a gypsum board, what they do is that they just apply a wallpaper over it, and that's it. Otherwise, they used to go for painting of that calcium silicate board, and it's very easy to apply it over. Secondly, now these are based on what materials where you are applying them. So what is the purpose of painting? The purpose of painting is that you are applying a protective covering to the surfaces. So this is the purpose of paint. One, you are applying a protective covering over the surface. Secondly, you are decorating the surface. तो दोनों चीजें, these both things are important. For long term durability के लिए आपको protection जरूरी है, and for the purpose of having a better surface, you want the surface to be decorated. So paints, man, now if you just have a look, it will not for durability purposes, it will not allow the wood to decay or get destroyed. So that's one of the purposes that it's fulfilling. Secondly, if you are applying it over steel, it's not allowing the corrosion of the metals from happening. It's rendering all the surfaces that you are now actually just जो आप final coating जब करते हो, it's providing a very beautiful covering or a rendering जिसे हम कहते हैं over the surface. Now you can go for different textures then. With paints, you can apply paints in different textures, and then you could be getting different renderings, and so it's actually helping in the lighting within the rooms. Jessica, it's for example, I just use the background right now behind my picture. Now it's a white surface background that I'm using. Now earlier it was brown, and you must be seeing that although I have not changed the outlook of my room, this is just a virtual background, but it is actually throwing light at the same. So white surfaces are throw light. So for better lighting within the surfaces or within the rooms, तो rendering का एक principle है, better good lighting, good ventilation within the rooms, and so you have rendering में तीन उसूल है. You have good lighting, so you get a good perception within the rooms. Secondly, उसमें ventilation of the rooms is good. Thirdly, you have once you move into the room, you can get different forms and textures within the room from the rendering surfaces. So paints do that. Varnishes do that, distempers do that, paints to a lot of extent, because you have a lot of variety within the paint itself. तो उसमें आप different textures maintain कर सकते हो, उसके ऊपर different colors आप apply कर सकते हो. So people usually go with very dark colors at times, and there are different people have different choices and for colors. So, but what that does to a room from a building perspective is that it does not allow the lighting within the rooms to be proper. So for good lighting within the rooms, you always want surfaces to have lighter colors. Now, how are colors made? So how are paints made? That's very then important. So I'll discuss that, how that is done. तो एक ideal paint आपको क्या देना चाहिए? It should make the surface now. Yes, it should make the surface clean, healthy, and it should be actually free from water absorption, the surface. If that is happening, there will be वो surface moist नहीं रहना चाहिए. And if it's not remaining moist, it's a good surface. It's a clean and healthy surface. तो वो पेंट नहीं उखड़ जाएगा अगर वहां पर प्रॉपर वाटर प्रूफिंग उसकी की गई है. तो वाटर प्रूफिंग इज अ प्राइमरी रिक्विजिट फॉर पेंटिंग, वार्निशिंग एंड डिस्टेम्परिंग. अगर पानी सरफेस में हो, दीवार में हो, कॉलम में हो, कहीं पर भी हो, और उस वो मॉइस्चर एब्जॉर्ब कर रहा है, तो पेंट उखड़ जाएगा, नो मैटर हाउ मच अमाउंट ऑफ एक्रिलिक और इपॉक्सी कंटेंट इज प्रेजेंट in that surface. So a good paint or an ideal paint would have these properties. One, it would be cheap. A good paint would have these properties. It would be a cheap paint. Economically, I'm talking about. It's economical. It's a cheap paint. It's easy to apply. It's not harmful. Paint should not be harmful to the humans. If even after applications, it's becoming harmful for the humans after touching it, or so somebody then puts his fingers into the mouth, and even the kids would do that. So usse kya hoga? If it's chemically harmful, those chemicals will go into the human body. So paint should not be harmful. They should be cheap. They should be easy to apply. As you want, and the painted surface should get dry quickly rather than slowly. So jitna jaldi dry ho jaye, you want that to happen. It should not bring out toxic gases during its application. So that would be a good paint if it's not bringing out toxic gases during the application of the paint. So it's also forming a hard and durable coat over the surface. So it's also offering a very good, hard, durable coat over the surface. Then it's a good paint. If it's not offering a hard coating over the surface, yeah, you cannot say it's a good paint. Moreover, it should be durable. It should not peel off. It should not crack the paint. तो इसमें peeling off नहीं होनी चाहिए. Very important that it is fire resistant. Now the paint that you are applying, कल को वो उसमें आग नहीं लगनी चाहिए. It should not catch fire easily. So it should be fire resistant paints that you are applying, and it should be waterproofing paint itself, and a good binding paint. So these are the properties that you would have of a good paint. It should look very good to the eyes. It should not get discolored. So these are the now, what are the constituents of oil-based paints? Number one, you have a base. I told you, you have a base here. You have an inert filler there, or an extender here. So what is base within this paint? Base is the oil which is making up the base of it. Then you have a filler which is actually adding to the, making it inert and not keeping it acidic any longer. So that's an inert filler. You require a vehicle or a carrier to the paint from which it is being extended over to the surface. So some material which makes it fluid type, but such fluid type कि वो नीचे टपक सकता है, but at the same time for a particular portion वो brush के ऊपर लग जाता है. तो अगर वो ब्रश के ऊपर चिपक नहीं जाता, then you could not apply it. So वो ब्रश के ऊपर चिपक जाता है, तो उसके लिए आपको vehicle carrier चाहिए. Finally you require a dryer solvent there. तो उसके अंदर एक solvent होगा जो उसको जो ही आप अप्लाई करोगे तो उसके बाद वो सुखाने में उसमें मदद करता है. एक chemical you require. So and in other solvents within the paint, जो जिसमें you have thinners, तो वो उसको क्योंकि वो पहले गाढ़ा होता है, इट्स क्वाइट थिक, तो उसको थिन आउट करने के लिए you require the solvents or the thinners within the paint itself. And finally then you also require a coloring pigment. तो वो पिगमेंट जो उसको कलर दे रहा है. Now today you have, just have a look Asian Paints and others, what they have given to the, even to the local vendors, those coloring pigment machines, wherein what they have basic 3 colors, and those 3 colors which form the base for the other colors by their different compositions or by different amount of colors that go into making those. So they are actually computerized कलरिंग पिगमेंट्स. तो वो उसमें से उतना ही अमाउंट पिगमेंट का निकल जाता है टू गिव डिफरेंट. सो इट्स नॉट नाउ टुडे ओनली यू विल गेट 3 बेसिक कलर्स. टुडे you can get a combination of hundreds of colors from those coloring pigments, and because it's computerized, it's software based, so you can have hundreds of different types of coloring and textures to the surface from these. So these are the 6 things on which a paint is typically based on. There are other things that I had to discuss, including discussing these in detail regarding application of aluminum paints and other asbestos paints. I'll go to that in the next class, inshallah, and this will finish our first unit, although we have certain advanced materials, but I'll not go into the advanced materials right now before we go into the other units. So that will finish our first unit, inshallah, in the next class. If you have any questions, you can ask me right now. We'll have another class this week, inshallah, or early next week. Yes, any one of you? Any questions?